China tests its DF-27 hypersonic missile near Guam. The United States intercepts it at Mach 8. What happens next changes missile defense forever. November 12, 2025. 2:47 a.m., the Western Pacific, 340 nautical miles east of Guam. In the pre-dawn darkness, American early warning satellites detected a thermal bloom over mainland China. The signature was unmistakable. A ballistic missile launch from the Wuzhai test facility in Shanxi province. Within 8 seconds, the detection was confirmed, analyzed, and transmitted to Indo-Pacific Command in Hawaii, to NORAD in Colorado, and to the Aegis destroyers USS John Finn and USS Decatur operating near Guam. The classification came back immediately. DF-27 hypersonic glide vehicle. Estimated time to impact, 12 minutes. Target trajectory, U.S. military installations on Guam. The DF-27, China's newest weapon, represents a quantum leap in missile technology. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles that follow predictable parabolic arcs, hypersonic glide vehicles maneuver unpredictably during flight. They travel at speeds exceeding Mach 5, over 3,800 miles per hour, fast enough to cross the Pacific in minutes. Their flight path, skimming the upper atmosphere at altitudes between 40 and 100 kilometers, makes them nearly invisible to traditional radar until the final seconds before impact. And their ability to change course mid-flight renders conventional missile defense calculations obsolete. For 2 decades, military analysts warned that hypersonic weapons would render existing defenses useless. November 12th would test whether that assessment was correct. At 2:48 a.m., the DF-27 separated from its booster and began its glide phase. Racing eastward at Mach 8, it covered 100 miles every 90 seconds. Its target, Andersen Air Force Base on Guam, housed B-52 bombers, KC-135 tankers, and critical logistics infrastructure supporting U.S. operations across the Pacific. A successful strike would cripple American power projection for months. China claimed the test was purely scientific, a trajectory designed to impact harmlessly in open ocean 200 miles east of Guam. But the flight path took it directly over the island. Whether by design or navigational error, the DF-27 was on a collision course with American territory, and the United States had less than 12 minutes to respond. On the bridge of the USS John Finn, an Arleigh Burke Flight 2IA destroyer equipped with the latest Aegis Baseline 10 combat system, the tactical action officer processed information flooding his displays. The DF-27's velocity, altitude, and predicted impact point updated every second. Standard SM-3 interceptors, designed for ballistic missiles in space, were ineffective against targets maneuvering in the atmosphere. SM-6 missiles, while capable of atmospheric intercepts, had never engaged a target moving at Mach 8. The rules of engagement were clear. Defend U.S. territory against all threats. But the odds were brutal. 1 hypersonic missile, 2 attempts at interception, and technology pushed to its absolute limits. At 2:49 a.m., the order came: engage the target. The USS John Finn's vertical launch system opened. 2 SM-6 Block IB missiles, each worth $5.4 million, launched in rapid succession. Flames erupted from the ship's deck as the missiles climbed skyward, accelerating to Mach 3.5 and rising to 80,000 feet. The SM-6, originally designed for air defense and anti-ship roles, had been upgraded with enhanced seekers, more powerful rocket motors, and software capable of computing intercept solutions against maneuvering targets. But this would be its most challenging test. The DF-27, still 8 minutes from Guam, was traveling twice as fast as any target the SM-6 had ever intercepted in testing. Would you trust technology that's never been combat tested against the world's most advanced weapon? Type A if you'd fire everything immediately. Type B if you'd wait for a closer, more certain shot. Drop your call below. The first SM-6 climbed into the thin air of the stratosphere, its active radar seeker scanning for the hypersonic glide vehicle. At 2:50 a.m., it achieved lock. The DF-27, glowing white-hot from atmospheric friction, was unmistakable on infrared sensors. But the target was maneuvering, executing a corkscrew pattern designed to defeat exactly this type of interception. The SM-6's onboard computer recalculated intercept trajectories 50 times per second, adjusting its flight path to match. At 2:51 a.m., with a closure rate exceeding Mach 11, the interceptor and the hypersonic missile met 75 miles above the Pacific Ocean. The collision released kinetic energy equivalent to a freight train hitting a wall at 200 miles per hour. Both vehicles disintegrated instantly. Debris rained down across a 50-mile radius, glowing fragments that burned up on re-entry. On the USS John Finn, cheers erupted in the Combat Information Center. They had done it. The first combat intercept of a hypersonic weapon in history. But celebration was premature. At 2:51 and 15 seconds, radar operators detected something impossible: secondary contacts. The DF-27 hadn't been destroyed. It had deployed decoys. What they had intercepted was a sophisticated countermeasure, a radar reflector designed to mimic the hypersonic glide vehicle's signature. The real DF-27 was still inbound, now just 6 minutes from Guam and traveling at Mach 8.2. Panic flashed through the command center. The second SM-6 was still climbing, but it had been programmed to intercept the decoy's last known position. Reprogramming mid-flight was possible, but would cost precious seconds. The USS Decatur, 40 miles to the south, had 2 SM-6 missiles ready, but needed 30 seconds to achieve firing solutions. Guam's ground-based THAAD system, designed for terminal phase intercepts, was activating, but wouldn't be ready for another 90 seconds. The timeline was collapsing. At 2:52 a.m., the USS John Finn's captain made a decision that would be studied in war colleges for decades. He ordered the second SM-6 reprogrammed, accepting a 15-second delay for a chance at a proper intercept. At 2:52 and 20 seconds, the reprogrammed SM-6 received its new target data. Its trajectory shifted, the missile burning fuel at maximum rate to reposition. The DF-27, now 4 minutes from impact, began its terminal maneuvers, diving from 60,000 feet to 40,000 feet, then climbing back to 55,000 feet. It wove an unpredictable path designed to exhaust interceptor fuel and defeat tracking algorithms. But the SM-6's seeker, enhanced with artificial intelligence-assisted targeting, adapted. At 2:53 a.m., the interceptor closed to within 20 miles of the hypersonic glide vehicle. Final guidance updates came from the Aegis system, factoring in atmospheric conditions, target acceleration, and probable evasion maneuvers. At 2:53 and 40 seconds, the SM-6 intercepted the DF-27 at an altitude of 48,000 feet, 180 miles east of Guam. The impact was catastrophic. The hypersonic glide vehicle, traveling at Mach 8, possessed enormous kinetic energy. When the SM-6's 140-pound blast fragmentation warhead detonated, it didn't need to destroy the DF-27 completely. It just needed to damage the vehicle's control surfaces or heat shielding. The explosion peppered the DF-27 with shrapnel traveling at supersonic speeds. The glide vehicle's left control fin sheared off. Its heat-resistant nose cone cracked. Aerodynamic forces, which at Mach 8 are brutal, tore the crippled missile apart. Within 2 seconds, the DF-27 had disintegrated into hundreds of fragments, most small enough to burn up on re-entry. Subscribe now if you want more coverage of cutting-edge military technology. This kind of deep analysis is what this channel does best. At 2:54 a.m., the threat board went green. No inbound contacts. The DF-27 had been neutralized. Debris from the interception fell into the ocean 150 miles east of Guam, posing no danger to the island or its inhabitants. Andersen Air Force Base remained fully operational. American bombers continued their patrols. And across the Pacific, military commanders absorbed the implications. For the first time in history, a hypersonic weapon had been intercepted in combat conditions. The balance of power had just shifted. The USS John Finn's crew didn't celebrate. They were too busy analyzing data. The intercept had succeeded, but by the narrowest margin. The decoy had cost them 1 interceptor. The reprogramming delay had nearly allowed the DF-27 to reach Guam. And the reliance on a single SM-6 to stop a weapon traveling at Mach 8 revealed how close they had come to catastrophic failure. The captain transmitted a priority message to Pacific Command. Hypersonic intercept successful. Extreme difficulty. Recommend multiple interceptor salvos for future engagements. The message was blunt, but accurate. They had won, but replicating this success was far from guaranteed. China's reaction was swift and contradictory. State media initially reported a successful test, claiming the DF-27 had impacted its intended target area in international waters. When U.S. Pacific Command released telemetry data showing the intercept, Beijing changed its narrative. The test had been a research mission, not a weapons launch. The trajectory over Guam was accidental, a guidance system malfunction, and the intercept, while acknowledged, was dismissed as a lucky shot against an unarmed test vehicle. But the propaganda couldn't hide the reality. China had unveiled its most advanced weapon, and the United States had destroyed it. The psychological impact was devastating for Beijing's military leadership. Internationally, the intercept sent shockwaves through defense establishments. Japan, South Korea, and Australia, all within range of Chinese hypersonic missiles, requested immediate briefings on SM-6 capabilities. Taiwan accelerated its own missile defense procurement. NATO members, facing similar threats from Russian hypersonic programs, sought cooperation agreements with the United States. The message was clear. Hypersonic weapons, while formidable, were not invincible, and nations investing billions in these systems could no longer assume they provided an unstoppable first strike capability. The technical lessons were profound. The SM-6 Block IB, with its enhanced seeker and AI-assisted targeting, had proven capable of tracking and intercepting maneuvering hypersonic targets. But the intercept required perfect information from Aegis radar, split-second decision-making, and a degree of luck that couldn't be reliably replicated. Defense analysts calculated that against a salvo of multiple hypersonic missiles, even the most advanced destroyer would face overwhelming odds. The solution, they concluded, was layered defense, space-based sensors to detect launches earlier, more interceptors per target, and directed energy weapons, lasers, and high-powered microwaves to engage hypersonic threats at longer ranges. For the United States military, November 12th validated decades of investment in missile defense. The Aegis system, repeatedly criticized as expensive and unproven, had just achieved what many experts claimed was impossible. The SM-6 missile, a weapon originally designed for different missions, had been adapted through software upgrades and targeting enhancements to counter the most advanced threat on Earth. And the crews operating these systems had demonstrated the training and composure necessary to execute flawlessly under pressure. The technological edge that America had fought to maintain was real, proven, and decisive. But the victory was also a warning. China would learn from this failure. Future hypersonic missiles would deploy more decoys, maneuver more aggressively, and attack in larger numbers. The DF-27 Intercept was a first-round win in a contest that would continue for decades. And the United States could not afford complacency. Every successful intercept raised the bar for the next generation of threats. The arms race in hypersonic weapons and defenses was accelerating, and staying ahead required relentless innovation, testing, and investment. For the people of Guam, November 12th was a near miss they would never forget. Had the intercept failed, a weapon traveling at Mach 8 would have struck Andersen Air Force Base with kinetic energy equivalent to a large conventional bomb. Casualties would have been measured in hundreds. Infrastructure damage would have paralyzed American operations for months. And the psychological impact, a successful Chinese strike on U.S. territory, would have been catastrophic. Instead, they woke to news that a threat they hadn't known existed had been neutralized while they slept. The American military, often taken for granted, had just saved their lives. The USS John Finn returned to Pearl Harbor 3 weeks later. Her crew received commendations, her captain was promoted, and her Combat Information Center, where the intercept had been coordinated, became a pilgrimage site for naval officers studying missile defense. The data collected during the engagement, terabytes of radar tracks, intercept calculations, and post-impact analysis, was classified and disseminated to a select group of defense contractors and research institutions. Every byte was invaluable, a roadmap for improving future intercepts and staying ahead of evolving threats. China, meanwhile, faced uncomfortable questions. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, which had conducted the DF-27 test, underwent a leadership purge. 3 generals were reassigned. The test program was suspended pending a full review, and development resources shifted toward countermeasures, ways to defeat American missile defenses. But the damage was done. The aura of invincibility surrounding hypersonic weapons had been shattered. And potential adversaries, from North Korea to Iran, recognized that launching such weapons against the United States was no longer a guaranteed success. The Intercept also reshaped global defense markets. Lockheed Martin, manufacturer of the SM-6, saw its stock price surge 8% in a single day. Raytheon, producer of the Aegis combat system, received inquiries from a dozen nations seeking similar capabilities, and smaller firms specializing in hypersonic detection and tracking saw their valuations skyrocket. The defense industry, always quick to capitalize on demonstrated capabilities, ramped up production and research. Within a year, SM-6 production rates doubled. Aegis upgrades accelerated, and new missile defense concepts moved from laboratories to test ranges. As analysts dissected every second of the November 12th engagement, one truth emerged. The intercept succeeded because of integration. Satellites detected the launch. Aegis radar tracked the target. SM-6 missiles provided the kinetic kill, and human operators made split-second decisions that software alone couldn't. The lesson was clear. Future missile defense required not just advanced weapons, but seamless coordination across space-based sensors, naval platforms, ground systems, and trained personnel. No single technology could counter hypersonic threats. Only a layered, integrated approach stood a chance. For the USS Decatur, which had been preparing to fire when the John Finn second interceptor succeeded, the engagement was a reminder of how thin margins are in modern warfare. Had the second SM-6 failed, Decatur's missiles would have been the last line of defense. And had they failed, THAAD systems on Guam would have faced a target traveling at Mach 8 with less than 90 seconds of warning. The redundancy built into American missile defense, often criticized as wasteful, had proven essential. One layer might fail, but multiple layers ensured something would work. The strategic implications extended beyond technology. November 12th demonstrated American resolve to defend its territories and allies. China had tested whether the United States could respond to hypersonic threats. The answer was yes, decisively. For nations considering aggression against American interests, the lesson was sobering. Even the most advanced weapons could be countered, and any attack would face not just military retaliation, but technological responses that rendered those weapons obsolete. The deterrent value of successful defense, often underestimated, was on full display. As the debris from the DF-27 settled into the Pacific Ocean, both nations recalculated their strategies. China accelerated hypersonic programs, determined to develop weapons that couldn't be intercepted. The United States expanded missile defense investments, determined to stay ahead. And across the Pacific, a new phase of military competition began, one where speed, detection, and interception would define the balance of power. November 12, 2025, was not the end of the hypersonic threat. It was proof that the threat could be beaten. And in the high-stakes game of modern warfare, that made all the difference. Now, I want your strategic assessment. First, was this intercept a technological breakthrough or a lucky outcome that won't be repeatable? Second, should the U.S. prioritize developing its own hypersonic weapons or focus on perfecting defenses? Third, How do hypersonic missiles change the strategic calculus for countries like North Korea and Iran? Share your analysis in the comments. Your perspectives shape the discussions we have here. And if this breakdown of cutting-edge missile defense gave you a new understanding of modern warfare, show your support by hitting that like button, subscribing to this channel, and turning on notifications. Until next time, stay informed, stay sharp, and remember that technological superiority isn't about having the best weapons. It's about making sure those weapons actually work when everything depends on it.